Imagine walking alongside a windswept shoreline at dusk when you suddenly stumble upon a strange relic half buried in the sand. A comb with tangled hair, a blackened shell carved like an eye socket, or perhaps a tiny velvet pouch that feels like it could have held a mermaid's treasure. In the dim light, these finds look eerie and otherworldly, hinting that the line between myth and reality might be thinner than we think. Not every mermaid artifact is what it seems, but that only makes the truth more fascinating. It sounds like something out of a horror film, but in March 2025, beachgoers in Kent, England found a bizarre, washed-up object and at first thought it might be a mermaid's remains. They described it as a carved wooden creature with the tail of a fish and the torso and head of an alien-like creature. Paula Reagan, who took the photos, said, quote, "The head looked skeletal, but the back part, where the fishtail was soft and squidgy." Imagine that. A freaky fishtail thing staring back at you. Local police eventually determined it wasn't a real creature at all, but a carved figurehead or sculpture. In fact, it closely resembled images of P.T. Barnum's infamous 19th century Fiji mermaid hoax, a half-monkey, half-fish mummified oddity. In other words, it was art, not animal, but it is a perfect example of how our minds can play tricks. A bit of driftwood and carved wood looked exactly like a mermaid skeleton. So the lesson? Sometimes mermaid bones are just human-made curiosities masquerading as legend. Picture this. For decades, a small, blackened mermaid figure sat unnoticed in a Shinto temple in Japan, freakish and mysterious. Scientists finally took a close look in 2022 and were stunned by what they found. CT scans showed that the tiny mermaid, only about 30 centimeters long, wasn't a strange new animal at all, but a creepy doll made of paper, cloth, and fish parts. According to news reports, the creature, quote, looks like a monkey-mermaid hybrid. Fuzzy head, little arms, a fishy tail, but under the skin there's no skeleton. In fact, the body is mostly stuffed cloth, the face has no bones, and the tail contains fish scales. One researcher said there's no fish skeleton at all inside. Radiocarbon dating even showed it was crafted around the late 1800s. Why would anyone do this? In Edo period Japan, the legend of the Ningyo was very popular. The theory is that this mermaid was created as a talisman or curiosity to attract pilgrims or bring good luck during a smallpox outbreak. In short, it was an elaborate hoax. Not a new sea creature, but it does make for a spooky story. Priests treated it like a sacred relic for generations, never guessing their mermaid was a stitched together doll of fish parts and paper. If you hear about someone finding a spiral horn on the beach, you might think unicorn, or perhaps mermaid unicorn. In fact, the long sword-like tusk of a narwhal has inspired exactly those myths. In medieval Europe, before narwhals were well known, wealthy rulers bought narwhal tusks thinking they were unicorn horns with magical powers. Princes' cups were carved from them, queens drank from them to purify water, and people definitely didn't think they came from whales. In one museum, the Cloisters in New York, an 80-inch tusk is labeled as a unicorn horn even as recently as the 17th and 18th centuries. In some seafaring legends, these ivory spirals were also called horns of the sea or linked to merpeople. So a narwhal tusk could be called a mermaid's horn in the right folklore, but it's really just the tooth of a deep-sea whale. This real artifact turned myth just shows how an ordinary sea creature can spawn wild mermaid or unicorn stories. Have you ever picked up a little black pouch on the sand and wondered if it was a mermaid's treasure? Those little leathery cases are actually called mermaid's purses, but sadly they aren't filled with pearls or coins or forks. They are shark and skate egg cases. The embryos of baby sharks or rays developing safely inside. Scientists explain that some skates and sharks don't give live birth, but instead they lay eggs sealed in these pouch-like cases. To early beachcombers, a mermaid's purse just looked like something a mermaid might carry. A conservation group notes some people believe they were purses or bags for the treasures belonging to a mermaid, but in reality, if you open one up carefully after it's hatched, of course, you'd find a tiny shark pup. So next time you see a mermaid's purse tangled in seaweed, remember it's a gift from a shark mom, not a mermaid, and it might just be best to leave it alone. One of the creepiest places you might find a mermaid is in a church, but that's exactly what happened in Cornwall, England. In the 14th century, a choir boy in Zenar disappeared, and the local legend says a mermaid lured him away. The church still has a hand-carved wooden pew end showing a mermaid with a fishtail, so worshippers literally sat next to a mermaid carving every single Sunday. This is the only medieval church bench end in England known to depict a mermaid, and the carving was likely inspired by this legend. Today you can still see her in the church pew. It is a fascinating blend of faith and folklore, a real wooden artifact commemorating a local mermaid myth. In 1493, Christopher Columbus wrote in his logbook that he saw 3 mermaids off the coast of Haiti. He was disappointed to find that they were not as beautiful as he expected. They looked like 3 men in the sea. But here's the twist. Almost certainly, those mermaids were not mythical sirens at all, but manatees. The Smithsonian's Ocean blog explains that Columbus's mermaids were probably the first recorded sightings of manatees, also referred to as sea cows. Manatees are big, chubby, and have round faces, not like a Hollywood mermaid, but from a distance, a tired sailor might convince himself they were human-like. Scientists point out that the order name for manatees is Sirenia, from sirens, because mariners long ago thought these gentle mammals were mermaid relatives. In some parts of Asia, the animals that inspired mermaid legends were actually dugongs, close relatives of manatees. These plump, flippered sea cows were sometimes called mermaids or spirit women of the sea, but a shocking 2022 study revealed that they are now functionally extinct in Chinese waters. Researchers interviewed fishermen and found no confirmed sightings in decades, none after 2000 actually. Old records showed plenty of dugongs and mermaids in old tales around 1960, but their numbers crashed rapidly. In short, China's mermaids have literally disappeared. This sobering fact connects back to our theme. Many mermaid myths arose when people saw strange marine mammals briefly and imagined something magical. Now science is protecting the memory of those real creatures. It is a reminder that the real ocean is changing, and sometimes, sadly, mermaid-like animals vanish entirely. Mermaid artifacts aren't only old fossils, some are part of living traditions. In West and Central Africa and even the Caribbean, many people worship a water spirit called Mami Wada, literally Mother Water. She is often depicted as a beautiful mermaid-like woman with flowing hair, sometimes holding a snake. At the Smithsonian's National Museum of African Art, an altar to her was set up in an exhibit. Even though it was just a display, visitors started treating it like a real shrine. People left coins, jewelry charms, a hairbrush, even a little toy guitar on the altar as offerings. It is a fascinating mix of art and folklore, showing that the idea of mermaids isn't just made up, it can be an active part of culture today. Archaeologists sometimes unearth the ancient influence of mermaid myths in very surprising places. In Amasra, Turkey, an excavation in 2023 uncovered a large 2nd century AD marble statue of a half-naked female figure resting on an urn. The experts believe she's a water nymph or sea spirit from Roman times. In Roman myth, there were divinities of the sea and fresh water, essentially ancient mermaid-like creatures. This statue is about 1.5 meters tall and was part of a gymnasium complex. The woman is, quote, wearing a cloak over the lower regions and leaning on an urn, which likely means that she is a nymph of water. It is a beautiful real artifact showing how the Romans blended gods and mermaid imagery. So in Turkey today, we have a 1,800-year-old sculpture of a mermaid sea goddess. Even deep in Papua, island lore hides mermaids. Archaeologists working around Lake Sentani found ancient wood carvings on the support pillars of a traditional tribal house showing mermaid motifs. This discovery was reported in 2020. The carved figure depicts a beautiful woman with long flowing hair and a fish tail. Local legend says the Sentani people's ancestors came from the Pacific Ocean, so a mermaid carving makes symbolic sense. The archaeologists say this new data gives insight into the tribe's origins, and in other words, the mermaid carving is part of their creation story. This carved mermaid is a real artifact showing how mermaid images can be woven into a culture's history. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye.